Hello everyone, my name is David. Today we are going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In the southwest of Ottawa, the capital of Canada, in a suburb called Barrhaven, Bhupinder Gill and his wife Jagtar Gill lived with their 3 children. The date was January 29, 2014, and it was their 17th wedding anniversary. It was around 12 p.m., and Bhupinder Gill was heading to the grocery store with his 14-year-old daughter Dilpreet to buy a cake for their anniversary and some flowers for his wife. Meanwhile, Jagtar Gill was resting at home because she had just been discharged from the hospital the previous day after undergoing hernia surgery. Hernia is a bulging of an internal organ through a weak area or tear in the muscle or other tissue that hold it in place. Most hernias occur in the abdomen. That day, the other 2 children of Jagtar Gill were at school, but their eldest daughter, Dilpreet, had taken the day off from high school to take care of her mother. Bhupinder Gill and his daughter returned home around 1 p.m. Bhupinder Pal began unloading the groceries from the car while Dilpreet walked toward the front door. She noticed that the door was unlocked, even though they had made sure to lock it properly before leaving for the store. Dilpreet entered the house saying, "Mom, we're back home. Where are you, Mom?" But there was no response. As she walked anxiously toward the living room, she saw her mother lying on the floor. At first, Dilpreet thought her mother might have fallen asleep on the sofa and then slipped off. But when she got closer, she noticed blood splatters on her mother's body. Seeing this, Dilpreet screamed loudly, and hearing her daughter's scream, Bhupinder Pal rushed inside. When Bhupinder Pal saw his wife's body on the floor, he was momentarily confused and didn't know what to do next. Meanwhile, Dilpreet went to the first floor of the house to try calling an ambulance, but she saw that all the wires of their telephone had been cut. Then Bhupinder Pal pulled himself together and dialed 911 from his cell phone. During the call, Bhupinder Pal was crying heavily, and hearing the panic in his voice, the 911 operator told him to stay calm, lay his wife flat, and try giving her CPR. But as soon as he heard that, Bhupinder Pal became completely quiet, and realizing the seriousness of the situation, the 911 operator quickly dispatched an ambulance and a police team to Jagtar's house. Shortly after, several police cars and an ambulance arrived outside Bhupinder Pal's house. Paramedics then saw that there was nothing they could do to help Jagtar Gill because she had already passed away. Since the police were already present, they cordoned off the house with crime scene tape. Meanwhile, a woman from the neighborhood came over and started peeking through the window at the crime scene. A police officer on the scene asked her if she was a relative of the Gill family. The woman replied that she lived next door and knew Bhupinder Pal and Jagtar well. She had come over after seeing the police and ambulance vehicles to check if everything was all right in their house. Upon hearing this, the police officers don't give the woman much information, but they do tell her that Jagtar Gill is no longer alive. Hearing this, the neighbor leaves in tears. Meanwhile, the forensic team working on the case had confirmed that Jagtar was attacked with a heavy object and stabbed multiple times all over her body. However, no heavy object or knife was found near Jagtar's body. After this, the police detectives asked Jagtar's family to stay somewhere else for a few weeks so the forensic team could secure the crime scene and gather evidence thoroughly. Later, while searching the house, police officers find a pair of rubber gloves typically used for cleaning. Strangely, one of the gloves had a missing finger. The police also recover blood-stained knives from beneath some dirty dishes in the kitchen sink. Blood spatters were found on the living room carpet, on the sofa, on the stairs leading to the second floor, on the bathroom floor upstairs, and even inside the wash basin. Additionally, the police discover a 5-kilogram weightlifting rod in the basement, placed on top of a Christmas decoration box. This rod also had bloodstains, and seeing this, the investigators seize it as evidence. However, the police didn't think it was a robbery case because Barrhaven is considered a safe neighborhood. Furthermore, the doors and locks of the house were intact and nothing was stolen. Jagtar's body was still adorned with all her valuable jewelry. Also, the area where Jagtar's house was located had several new homes under construction, so builders and construction companies had installed CCTV cameras to protect their equipment and model homes from theft. Seeing this, the police officers decided to thoroughly review the CCTV footage, but none of the recordings showed anything suspicious or anyone that could raise suspicion. After that, some police officers interviewed people in the neighborhood from whom they learned about Jagtar's background and what kind of woman she was. In 1994, 23-year-old Jagtar set foot in Canada for the first time with her parents and siblings. But 3 years later, in 1997, the entire family returned to India and 26-year-old Jagtar was married to 20-year-old Bhupinderpal Gill. After the wedding, Bhupinderpal and Jagtar returned to Canada and began living in Ottawa. Initially, Jagtar worked at an electronics company while Bhupinderpal started driving a taxi. Alongside their day jobs, they also delivered pizzas at night, and before sunrise, they delivered newspapers. 2 years after their marriage, their daughter Dilpreet was born, followed by another daughter and then a son. At the time of Jagtar's death, Dilpreet was 15. The second daughter was 10, and the youngest son was 8 years old. Jagtar continued working at the electronics company, while Bhupinderpal got a permanent job as a bus driver with Ottawa's OC Transpo, a transport company. Together, they started saving money to buy a new house, and soon the Gill family purchased a double-garage home in Ottawa's Barrhaven suburb. After their new home was built, the entire Gill family moved in, and Bhupinderpal's parents also lived there with them. Jagtar Gill was very happy in her new home, but no one knew what enemy a simple woman like her had that led to her being killed so brutally. Then, on February 20th, 2014, many members of the local Sikh community gathered at the Gurdwara Sahib in Ottawa to pray for peace for Jagtar's soul. Jagtar Gill had been beaten so badly that her family couldn't leave the casket open, and only a very few people were allowed to see her face one last time. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. You might remember we mentioned a few minutes ago that the police found a blood-stained iron weightlifting bar in the basement of Jagtar Gill's home. In fact, the detectives preserved that weightlifting bar as a key piece of evidence, as the blood on it suggested it was used to beat Jagtar Gill, but the police started wondering why the killer tried to hide the rod in the basement, and that led them to think that if the killer was someone close to the family, they might try to hide it again. To test this theory, the detectives placed an identical iron rod covered with fake blood into a Christmas decoration box in the basement. Then they installed a hidden camera in the basement, and a few days later the camera recorded something that shifted suspicion toward Bhupinderpal. The footage showed Bhupinderpal just 10 days after Jagtar's death. He opened the Christmas decoration box and tried to hide the weightlifting rod in his jacket, but it was too big to fit. The very next day, Bhupinderpal returned to the basement and this time managed to hide the weightlifting bar in his pants. But he was completely unaware that some police officers were watching all of this through the camera. So when Bhupinderpal left the house with the bar hidden in his pants, officers followed him. Bhupinderpal then went about a kilometer from his home to a wooded area and threw the weightlifting bar into the bushes. But as soon as he left, the officers retrieved the bar. This act left the police officers very confused because they believed Bhupinderpal couldn't be the killer. Based on a statement he had given, the police checked CCTV footage from a supermarket called Sobeys to confirm whether he was really there at the time of Jagtar's death. The footage supported his statement, but the question remained, why did Bhupinderpal throw the iron rod into the bushes? To uncover the truth behind this, the officers released a fake news story saying that they had found a blood-stained metal rod related to Jagtar's murder case in the bushes of a wooded area. After the fake news was published, the officers waited for Bhupinder's next move. Upon reading the news, Bhupinder Gill went straight to the police station and admitted that he had thrown the metal bar into the bushes himself. When the police asked him why he did it, Bhupinder Pal explained that when he found Jagtar's body, the metal bar was lying near it. At the time, he was afraid the attacker might still be hiding somewhere in the house. That's why he picked up the rod and searched the entire house, including the basement, but didn't find anyone. Afterward, he threw the rod into a corner of the basement. However, he forgot to tell the police that the rod was originally lying next to his wife, Jagtar's body. Then, a week later, when he saw the metal rod still there, he panicked and decided to throw it into the bushes near the woods by their house. After this interrogation, a team of police officers also searches the area around Jagtar's house and questions some of the neighbors. During this, they meet a man named Scott, who was a close friend of Bhupinder Pal. Scott says that he went to offer his condolences to Bhupinder Pal, his good friend and Jagtar's husband, the day after her death. However, Scott tells the police that Bhupinder Pal didn't seem sad at all about his wife's death. He also mentions that there was something strange about the relationship between Bhupinder Pal and Jagtar Gill. They were often upset with each other. According to Scott, Bhupinder Pal was also close to a 35-year-old woman named Gurpreet Ronald, who lived in the same area. Scott further explains that Bhupinder Pal and Gurpreet behaved very casually with each other, as if they had known each other for a long time. Now that Gurpreet Ronald's name has come up in the case, the police call her to the station for questioning. When Gurpreet arrives at the police station, one of the officers recognizes her as the woman who was seen trying to peek through the window of Jagtar's house at the time of the murder. In fact, Gurpreet had also come to Canada at a very young age with her parents and later married a white Canadian man named Jason Ronald. Although they had been married for 13 years, their relationship had recently been plagued with constant arguments, mainly due to suspicions of infidelity on both sides. A female police detective then begins questioning Gurpreet in a separate room and asks how she knew Jagtar. Gurpreet tells the detective that they were not just neighbors but also very good friends. Gurpreet used to drive buses for the same company as Bhupinder Pal. During further questioning, Gurpreet explains that she was quite close to Jagtar Gill. They used to go shopping together and often spent their free time chatting. The next question from the detective is about her routine on the day of the murder, January 29th. Gurpreet replies that she woke up early as usual, had breakfast, and then started cleaning the house. She then called a friend named Rosa, and the two planned to meet in the afternoon. Rosa was an interior designer and needed help designing a friend's house. But before meeting Rosa around 12:30 p.m., Gurpreet went shopping. The investigator then asks which shopping center she went to and what she bought. Gurpreet says she went to Sobeys but didn't find anything worth buying, so she returned empty-handed. However, later she changes her statement and says that she actually ran into Bhupinder Pal and his daughter Dilpreet there, and they were buying cabbage. Gurpreet also bought a cabbage and returned home around 1:30 p.m. But when she got back, she saw an ambulance outside Bhupinder Pal's house and tried to peek through the window to see why it was there. After this, the female detective asks Gurpreet about the nature of the relationship between Bhupinder Pal and Jagtar Gill. Gurpreet says that Jagtar Gill was a very traditional woman who followed all Indian and Punjabi customs. Without being asked, Gurpreet also begins explaining what kind of person she is, and you can hear this entire conversation in the recording.
Mrs. Gill, how would... Always traditional. As far as I've seen her, she's always wearing the Punjabi suit and always... I call her traditional from what I see.
Gurpreet then clarifies that she often communicated with Bhupinder Pal through calls and messages because they worked at the same place and usually had shifts at the same time. After this, finally, the female interrogator asks Gurpreet about the interior designer, Rosa, who was supposed to come to her house. In response, Gurpreet says that when she returned home after shopping, her friend Rosa was standing outside her main door waiting for her. But what the female interrogator noted about Gurpreet during this interview was that she was answering every question in excessive detail, as if she were trying to justify something. At the end of this interview session, the interrogator notices that Gurpreet also has a bandage on one of her fingers. When the interrogator asks her what happened, Gurpreet responds that she was cutting potatoes when the knife slipped and cut her finger. But the finger on which Gurpreet had the cut was the same one on the glove that was also cut, which the police had found at the crime scene. Anyway, this round of police interrogation came to an end, but then they questioned Gurpreet's friend, Rosa. Rosa stated that she and Gurpreet met at around 3:30 p.m. on January 29th, not at 1:30 p.m. as Gurpreet had claimed. Rosa further told the police that she had asked Gurpreet why an ambulance and police had come to their street that day. In response, Gurpreet told her friend Rosa that someone had stabbed and killed their neighbor, Jagtar Gill. This statement from Rosa surprised the police because at that time they hadn't even allowed Gurpreet into the house, nor had they disclosed how Jagtar Gill died. Yet Gurpreet knew exactly who in the Gill family had been murdered and what weapon was used. Because of all this, the police's suspicion toward Gurpreet and Bhupinder Pal started to grow, especially since it's common for the attacker to accidentally cut themselves during a stabbing. Because of this, the police started wiretapping the phones of Gurpreet and Bhupinder Pal. The police hoped that the two might discuss Jagtar's murder, but the wiretap never caught them mentioning her. However, when the police pulled their call history from a month before the murder, they found that the two had communicated about 250 times in that period. That's an average of 8 to 9 calls a day, including on the day of the murder. But all the evidence the police had gathered so far was circumstantial, and none of it directly linked the two to the murder. Among the evidence collected from the crime scene was various DNA found near Jagtar's dead body. Also, the investigators had now seen the cut on Gurpreet Ronald's hand, so they needed a DNA sample from Gurpreet because if she had any link to the murder, her DNA would match the DNA found at the scene. But to conduct the DNA test, the police still needed to find a way to obtain Gurpreet's DNA sample. For this, some officers from the department were approved to carry out a sting operation. Then, a police investigator dressed in plain clothes knocked on Gurpreet's door and said she was a representative from the construction industry and that they were conducting a survey. She said that if Gurpreet participated in the survey, her name would be entered in a draw where the first prize was 6 months of free mortgage payments and the runner-up would win a vacation. Hearing all this, Gurpreet agreed to take part, filled out a form, and sealed it in an envelope using her saliva. The fake construction industry representative took the envelope and left. In this way, the police obtained Gurpreet's DNA sample through her saliva and sent it to the lab for testing. But besides this, the police also used several other methods to gather evidence against Gurpreet. One day, the police even left a note on Gurpreet's car window that said, "Killer." In fact, they were hoping that after seeing this note, Gurpreet would immediately call Bhupinder Pal and the two would discuss the murder. But instead, Gurpreet reported the note to the police and didn't mention it to Bhupinder Pal even once. However, a few days later, the DNA test results came in, and there was no doubt that Gurpreet's DNA was found in many places inside the house. Gurpreet's DNA was actually found near Jagtar's body, in the kitchen, and in several spots in the upstairs bedroom. Because of this, the police now had a strong reason to arrest Gurpreet. As a result, on April 7, 2016, Gurpreet was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of Jagtar Gill. Just 6 days later, on April 13, 2016, Bhupinder Pal Gill was also taken into custody. The police named both of them as co-accused, and they were tried together. In court, both of them were presented and, from the beginning, they tried to prove their innocence. However, the investigators presented a case summary to the judge that detailed the motive behind Jagtar's murder and how it was carried out. The summary presented to the judge stated that for some time, Bhupinder Pal had not liked his wife Jagtar Gill at all, but he couldn't divorce her because divorce was viewed negatively in their community. Moreover, Bhupinder Pal and Gurpreet had been having an affair for 4 years before Jagtar's death, and in order to continue their affair, they planned Jagtar's murder together. According to the plan, on January 29th, Bhupinder Pal took his elder daughter Dilpreet out of the house on a pretext. But before leaving, he placed the weightlifting rod that would be used in the murder near the stairs, so Gurpreet could easily find it when she entered the house and use it to kill Jagtar Gill. Then, as per the plan, Gurpreet went to Jagtar Gill under the pretense of asking for something and, finding the right moment, attacked her with the weightlifting rod. But the attack with the rod alone did not kill Jagtar Gill, so Gurpreet went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife and stabbed Jagtar Gill multiple times. Finally, she slashed Jagtar's throat with the knife, and it was that final blow that caused her death. Clever Gurpreet didn't call Bhupinder Pal to inform him of the murder to avoid a call record. Instead, she went to the supermarket and told him in person. But in this case, even more shameful than a husband having his wife murdered was the fact that Bhupinder Pal sent his daughter into the house first, knowing that her mother's dead body was lying inside. A girl who was holding a bouquet to give to her mother had to witness a scene that would probably never leave her mind. After that, all the police investigators testified in court one by one, as did Bhupinder Pal's neighbor Scott and interior designer Rosa. Some post-mortem photos of Jagtar Gill were also shown in court, but as soon as these were displayed, Jagtar's family members left the courtroom because they couldn't bear to look at them. But apart from this, the police also present another witness in court named Susan. In fact, Susan was a life coach who gave people advice on how to stay happy in life. But when she hears about this murder in the news, she herself goes to the police and tells them that exactly 1 year ago, Bhupinder Pal and Gurpreet had come to her for relationship advice. Susan further tells the police that the two of them were ready to do anything to stay together, and they had shared some things with her that clearly showed their hatred towards Jagtar Gill. Because of Susan's statement, the police are also able to prove the motive behind Jagtar's murder in court. However, Gurpreet Ronald and Bhupinder Pal had hired different lawyers to defend themselves. While both of their lawyers came up with several different stories, by that time the police had gathered more than enough evidence. Finally, the day of the court's verdict arrives, and that day all the jury members declare Gurpreet and Bhupinder Pal guilty in front of everyone and sentence them according to the charge of first-degree murder. Now, both of them are behind bars for life and cannot even be released on parole until 25 years later. That is, until 2039. After this, while speaking to the media in front of the court, Jagtar's niece Ramandeep Chahal read out a statement written by all of her family members. In that statement, they spoke from the depths of their hearts.
The decision of this honorable court is affirming the verdict of the jury of 2016 and holding both accused Bhupinder Pal Gill and Gurpreet Ronald as guilty of first-degree murder.
So with that, the Jagtar Gill murder case comes to an end right here. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Thank you.